Thank you all for joining us this afternoon for the Circular Buildings Coalition webinar. And particularly this webinar is focused on information and a chance for a question and answer session on the open call process that we're running for the second time as part of the Circular Buildings Coalition in 2025. Really nice for you all to be joining us here today. As a bit of an introduction to kind of frame it off, really nice to meet you. My name is Max Russell. I work for Arup. I'm a senior consultant, and I've been involved with the Circular Buildings Coalition since its kind of origins back in 2022. And yeah, very excited to see this next wave and this next phase. In terms of who's joining me today, my colleague, also from Arup, Helene Sorensen, will also be providing a bit of information and speaking as well. And we're also joined by our colleagues, Victoria and Hannah from Smith Innovation, who are the partners also as part of the Circular Buildings Coalition as well. So we're very happy.
Can I do a quick introduction here as well? Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
By all means.
Yeah, like Max mentioned, I've been supporting the CBC of this round based with Arup in Berlin, and been collecting all these new fresh challenges for this round of the open calls. Happy to be here and explore this with all of you. Sorry, back to you.
Fantastic, thanks, Helene. Yes, so the premise of this session, first and foremost, is a question and answer. So as we're going through, we have a short presentation. As we're going through, please do pop your questions in the chat. I think there's a Q&A function within this Teams meeting, so feel free to populate those as we're going through the presentation as they come up. And we'll have a session at the end and leave enough time towards the end to respond to all of them. So in terms of what we'll be speaking of, as I mentioned, we'll give a little bit of an introduction for those, perhaps this is the first time that you're coming across the Circular Buildings Coalition, so we'll give a little bit of an intro about who we are, who are forming the Circular Buildings Coalition and some of the work that we do as part of the Circular Buildings Coalition, and then we'll dive in and do a little bit of a recap on the open call before providing some of that key information and some of the kind of details. And then, yeah, as I mentioned, leaving some space for the question and answers as well. I should mention that this webinar is being recorded, and not least it will be uploaded to the Circular Buildings website as a useful resource in case you or others wanted to go back and listen to any of the content or the questions as well as they come up. Great. So first we'll just give a little bit of an intro or a recap for many, I'm sure, on the Circular Buildings Coalition.
Exactly. I'll jump in here. So just to give a bit of information about who we are. So we're a coalition, and we're consisting of Arup, WTBC, WBCSD, Metabolic Circular Economy, and Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We're funded by the Loudest Foundation and supported by Smith Innovation as well. So yeah, it's a collaboration of industry and thought leaders and trying to accelerate and implement circular solutions across the built environment. Next slide. So our mission is to create a common language, first of all, and knowledge sharing across the sector, to increase demand for circular economy solutions and to increase collaborations across the value chain as well, and to develop and scale the uptake of solutions too. Next slide. So we've done this first of all by publishing a few reports. So first there was the Towards Circular Economy in the Built Environment and the Pathways Towards a circular building pathways towards 2050, and most recently the deep dives on cycling concrete and insurance and just transition. And secondly, next slide please. Secondly, we do this also by supporting blueprint projects, which is why we're all here today to find out more about. And last year there were 5 winners of this of the first round, and that was from BASE and Circuit Trades, Consular and UCLC and the Circular Value Institute who won that round. Next slide, please. So for the 2025, what we're trying to do this time is to, again, amplify proven solutions and scalable solutions that can accelerate a circular built environment in Europe. Next slide. And why apply? So first of all, to create impacts. This is hopefully our core value of why we're here. Also to secure funding. It's a 70K funding in euros. And you'll be able to deepen and share the knowledge of circular economy, but also to gain access both to the CBC network and to industry partners and markets, and get support and knowledge sharing from this network as well. So what is the CBC looking for? I think we can go. Yep, exactly. So we're looking for projects that we can support across 3 key aspects. The first, maybe you've heard, to go to the next slide. So first is to demonstrate assurance on the quality and reliability of secondary materials. And last year, there's an example from Consular who did that through looking into insurance of reclaimed construction materials. And secondly, sorry, I was jumping a bit. Secondly, to showcase the value of reused and secondary materials. And last year, again, as an example, Circuit Trade published a paper around futures trading and how we can integrate futures trading as a concept for reused materials. And lastly, we're looking for projects that can unlock data and information flows. So last year, again, it's an example from the UCLC that was doing the Building Passport alignment project. So looking into establishing a framework to facilitate ESG reporting and to scale this up. So this is just examples from last year that could kind of inspire what kind of solutions that we're looking for this year. And I think I am handing it back to you for the next slides.
Fantastic. Thanks, Helene. Yeah, so that, as Helene mentioned, kind of gives a little bit of an overview of some of the framing challenges that have been developed as part of the CBC, and really are some of those intervention points through the built environment system that we're aiming to really support solutions for and towards. So with the next few slides, I'll provide a little bit more of the information on some of the kind of key bits of knowledge and information that will be important for the application process. First and foremost, the dates. Now, some of you are maybe already quite familiar with some of these dates, but the open call was launched officially back in March. So it's been live for just over a month. We've had several of these webinars that have provided bits of information and bits of knowledge as we're going through. You can watch, as I mentioned before, you can watch some of the previous recordings of those webinars on the Circular Buildings Coalition website. Really key important date, first and foremost, is the closing date, which is the 11th of May 2025. So just under a month now. So that's at 11:59 on that Sunday. So do make sure that you have that in your calendars. With that closing, the winners will be announced within June, with the intention of kickstarting this next cohort in July, and that will run through to December 2025 through that mentoring and piloting of those blueprint projects as well. So some really key dates for you to be aware of. Now, so who can apply? This intentionally, the open call is to be very broad. Almost any startup, company, organization. One of the important considerations is that it's focused within Europe. Now, this is the EU 27+++, so it's not necessarily, you don't have to just be within the EU registered countries. It's also including the UK, Switzerland, Norway as well. There are some important exclusionary criteria to be aware of. We try to keep these as minimal as possible, but a few just to be mindful of. Again, a lot of this can be found on the Circular Buildings Coalition website as well. One of them is an exclusionary criteria is that you can't be a core partner of the Circular Buildings Coalition, which I wouldn't assume would rule anyone out in this webinar. One other one is, since this is not the first time we're running this, one of the other exclusionary criteria is that you can't be a past recipient of the Circular Buildings Coalition open call funding as well as that lead organization or as that lead applicant as well. So those 10 organizations that you saw previously. Another element that's also good to be aware of is that the project should be focused more on the circular economy and less solely based on bio-based construction. Not to say that bio-based construction isn't, very, very important within this transition. However, linked to our partnership with the Loudest Foundation, the Loudest Foundation have the Built by Nature program, which is more suitable for those types of initiatives and that type of funding as well. So we'd happily direct you towards Built by Nature, whereas this open call is very much focused on the circular economy, reuse, recovery, recycling, etc. How to apply? There's a form that can be accessed on the circularbuildingscoalition.com, online application of about 14 questions. And there's a link at the end of this presentation as well. You can receive a copy within the briefing pack, which includes the questions of those 14 questions for the application form as well, so that you can prepare your answers and draft your answers ahead of submitting or adding them to the submission form. So looking at the selection, how many projects will be selected and funded? There'll be a maximum of 6 in this round of funding. How will those initiatives be selected? That will be via, in a similar way to the first cohort, via the Circular Buildings Coalition Selection Committee that will be commencing in June as well. How will they be assessed? And this is quite an important one. And indeed, further information on the grading criteria or the selection criteria can be found on the briefing document online. In essence, there are 8 selection criteria that will be considered, and broadly they cover 3 themes, one of which is looking at impact, so exploring market potential, how aligned is that potential solution to those challenges that were mentioned previously, and looking at public value, so what broader value can be generated as well via the initiative. The solution is also one of the criteria, so it's looking at feasibility, how likely is it to succeed, and as well originality. And also the third criteria is looking at the team or the composition, the coalition. So looking at the additionality of the funding, to what extent is this funding, really providing that, unlocking something that wouldn't otherwise happen. Looking at partners and looking at coordination as well. As I said, there's some further information that can be received online on those selection criteria. So as we mentioned before, it's up to €70,000 of funding for the winning or the selected initiatives through this open call. But there's also some support that the CBC provides a bit more in kind. So that's looking at guidance. So through that June to December, or July to December rather, there'll be this guidance which will include some mentoring support from various organizations, both within the as core partners of the Circular Buildings Coalition, but also access to the network and the alumni through the Circular Buildings Coalition as well, looking at providing this support, recommendations across key milestones as well. And yeah, opportunity to reach audiences through the CBC network moving forward. So that mentoring support can be tailored to each initiative. From the first phase and previous phases, it's been a great diversity of different types of initiatives, which benefited from different types of support. So we didn't want to be too prescriptive on this up front. Then looking at some of the expectations of the selected initiatives. So what is it that will be that piloting process between July and December? What would be the outputs of that? So after those 6 months, in a similar way to, as you can see from some of the past examples on the Circular Buildings Coalition website, what we're really anticipating and hoping for is that 6-month process will help to pilot or carry out some sort of real-world demonstration of the stated solution. So really helping to put these concepts into reality as well. And that's perhaps quite an important element, that it's the funding is less suited for very early stage and conceptualizations and kind of broad research conceptualizations, but really trying to take some of these existing initiatives to help to demonstrate them in real world and help to scale some of that impact. What we're also expecting is to help, and this will come through that piloting process, to diffuse that solution to some of the target stakeholders. And then there's a little bit of reporting as well. So there's a short interim report to track on progress through that period. And then as a final output, producing a concise, publicly facing output that can help to summarize some of those lessons learned, what the initiative is and the impact that it could support, and what has been learned from that 6-month process and what comes next as well. So wanting to be quite light and lean, but really important to have that kind of tangible output towards the end. So some really key links here as well. There's a QR code that will take you to the Circular Buildings Coalition website, which I've mentioned already a few times or several times. And all of this information is there and detailed and documented as well. You can also reach out to the info at circularbuildingscoalition.org, the webpage or the email address there. If next week, say, you have any other additional clarifications or questions, we'll be happy to receive those and answer those as well. And I do encourage you to download the applications guide, which is the screen, the thumbnail just on the left-hand side of that screen as well, which takes you through both the challenges in a little bit more detail, providing some insights and guidance about the justification as why it's an important area to focus, as well as some examples, as Helene has taken us through, of some of the initiatives that we're looking to, as well as some of the selection criteria and some key dates within there as well. So that hopefully provides, the baseline of information that we have developed as part of the open call process. I'm sure for many, this is maybe a little bit of a refresh and a recap of some of the information that you already know. But for others that maybe this is the first time, hopefully this gives you a good orientation and setting about the open call and the process. With that being said, I'm happy to open to the question and answers and really happily receive whether there are any clarifications and use this opportunity to hear from you, whether there's any support and clarifications that you would like on those as well. Perhaps with this, I will stop sharing my screen.
There are a few comments or questions in the chat. So a few around eligibility. So one is, I just wanted to confirm who is eligible to apply. We're among the first 10 selected, but not one of the 5 winners. It says previous winners are not eligible, but not clear which group that applies to.
Yeah, that's a really good question and a really good point of clarification. So the exclusion would be the first cohort. That would be the 10 organizations, wouldn't be eligible to be the lead applicant within that. That's not to say if there was a coalition or kind of a partnership of which one of those organizations was also a part, that would also be suitable and be able to. But those 10 organizations wouldn't be able to be the lead applicant within that submission as well. Hopefully that clarifies that one.
Then there's a question around if local authorities can apply or if it's required / preferred for a business or solution to apply on their behalf.
Yeah, that's a really good it's a really good question. There's not an exclusion in relation to the local authorities to apply. Of course, that may be case by case basis, just in terms of the ability to receive some of those funds from a local authority as well, and perhaps there might be this opportunity, or maybe that limits some of those opportunities to apply. But indeed, it's focused around kind of the business and the value chain and the private sector around that, but recognizing that local authorities are indeed very important and very critical actors to form part of those demonstrations as well. So that's not one of the exclusionary criteria as well, but I would have to defer to your each individual city whether they are able to receive those funds as well.
Another one is a question around if the same applicant can submit 2 different applications, or is it just 1 per applicant?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I believe it should be okay to submit 2 different applications. Of course, it would value if they were different initiatives in themselves, and not just kind of 2 slight variations or slight spins on the same premise or the same principle. We'd encourage, if that was the case, to register and submit the best or kind of the most compelling case within that. But if they are 2 materially different initiatives, then indeed 2 applications could be submitted. We would limit the opportunity to only select 1 for that. So the same organization wouldn't be selected twice through that.
Great. There is also a few more content related questions. So first one is, would the building techniques like solar panel, could they be included in the proposal, or is it just for construction materials?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is particularly focused on kind of materials and components, and in particular, kind of framed in relation to some of those challenges. It's about facilitating the use of circular, reused, regenerative materials in that sense. It's less concerned with reducing the operational energy consumption or switching that operational energy consumption to renewables and solar PVs. That being said, if there's a compelling initiative that can support perhaps the recirculation or offering some of those energy generation as a service, for example, that fits in with the built environment, that can definitely be seen to align with some of those challenges, but it's less of an initiative to decarbonize the energy generation first and foremost and primarily. I definitely encourage you to look at the challenges and those challenge areas, and see to what extent the initiative would align with some of those kind of challenge propositions that have been outlined, and hopefully that clarifies. It's less on decarbonization purely in terms of energy generation, but really about how do we capture the most value and recirculate that value of circular materials, reused, recycled, regenerative materials.
There are 2 that are quite similar. So about what are the expectations at the end of the pilot? Yeah, so because it's if the project is limited to max 6 months, and also around what is expected to have at the end of those 6 months, if it's only as an intention to have a methodology, or if it has to be a real world demonstration.
Yeah, it's a really good question. We would definitely encourage that we would love to bring the focus of this open call is to support the initiatives that are maybe already conceptualized or already operating at a kind of a small scale, and kind of just testing at a very kind of localized scope, and to really support those to find to scale, whether that's scale in terms of the number of in its operations, or whether it's different geographies, and supporting that type of approach and that type of scaling. So it's less, and I think there's another question as well that came through about what stage of the blueprint projects are we hoping to support. Indeed, it's less, if I can speak in the technology readiness levels, if that hopefully that resonates with a few people or is familiar with a few people, it's less of the earlier stages 1 to 3, I think, and it's a bit more of that testing and piloting as well. What we would really love is to move from concepts into practice as well. So this is really what this open call is trying to help, really identifying where there is a market, a receptive market, and provide that compelling case for that receptive market, so that it's not just developed from just a solution provider perspective, but also to see where those receptive audiences are, so that that implementation process could be streamlined. That's not to say that it has to be fully implemented and fully operational at the end of the 6 months. That's very, very ambitious. But it's moving towards those kind of middle stage technology readiness levels as well. So it's moving just beyond that pure concept and conceptualization into something that can be tested, piloted, lessons learned as well. So hopefully that clarifies a couple of those questions there.
Another question is, who would own the IP of these outputs?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. There's some more information, and it specifies in a little bit more detail on that. In terms of the initiative itself, that would remain within the organization. The output, and in the first phase, it was a series of white papers were produced. That was an open, produced under the Open Commons license as well. The intention of this is that we want to support initiatives that can have that broader impact within the industry as well, and not just support siloed IP generation per se, but really support those initiatives that can have that wider impact across the industry. But I can definitely happily refer to the guidance document and the briefing document that's on the website that clarifies that a little bit further as well.
I think the last question from the chat is if we expect to have a co-financing plan for the 70K euro.
That's a really good question. Indeed, one of the criteria is looking at kind of co-contribution. There's a question that highlights around what additional kind of resources are part of that, whether the applying initiative or organization can provide that matching. It doesn't necessarily need to be a 50-50 match, and it doesn't necessarily need to be financial resources as well, but we'd be interesting to explore what's that kind of co-contribution that could be formed around in relation to that. So that could be time, resources in kind in relation to time, or any other that you feel is appropriate as well. But that is one of the selection criteria to highlight what that co-contribution might be. Of course, it's really then interesting as well of thinking around that scaling of how might this be scaled with, or have a pathway to scaling through kind of co-financing into the future. That may be a compelling thing within that 6-month initiative as well. But one of the initial selection criteria is through this element to look at that co-contribution as well. Fantastic. If there are any other questions, do absolutely feel free to post them in the question and answer function. Helene, thank you for monitoring that and sharing those. Similarly, if there's any follow-up questions or follow-up to any of the responses, do feel free to ask those as well. There's maybe a question here from Mary. who's asking how this open call is different from the one in 2024. As the one in 2024 is focused on white papers, if you understand correctly. Yeah, indeed, it's a really good question. Largely, it follows a very similar blueprint. One of the elements that we want to really demonstrate is that we haven't confined it to development of a white paper per se, to be very prescriptive on what that output may be. What I mentioned before is highlighting that publicly facing output, which consolidates the lessons learned and what the initiative is that can support kind of the industry and the knowledge and awareness around the industry broadly. That could be, something more akin to a white paper. It could be another type of, output that could be engaging, a video, etc. We want to definitely keep open in relation to that. One thing that's also that we want to maybe an important evolution from the previous stage is, as I was mentioning before, really kind of moving towards that testing and real world application of the different initiatives, and moving beyond the conceptualization in a number of cases. So there are a few really great examples of some of the earlier stage 2024 blueprint projects that started to really test and pilot and implement it. And we would love to encourage that much further as well, and have much more of a concerted focus on some of those initiatives as well. But broadly, the blueprint, pardon the pun, but the blueprint and the template for the open call process is quite similar and can be translated. There's perhaps one here around that mainly focus at looking at, just to clarify, a project that is mainly focused or only focused on looking at, for example, policy related research wouldn't be eligible. There has to be a practical demonstration element. To an extent, indeed, one of the criteria through the selection criteria would be highlighting that impact. Now, that practical demonstration could be interpreted in a number of different ways, and we want to be open. It doesn't necessarily have to be physical brick and mortar transportation of materials, right? So that can definitely be interpreted. However, we really want to have that application of the initiative, or if it's research, the application of that research to really have that real world impact. And so some of the within the application form, there's that impact criteria and impact consideration. So that's one that will be really exploring that real world practicality and applicability as well. So we don't want to be too prescriptive to say it has to be this type of initiative or that type of initiative, but really we want to support that application of knowledge and insights, and if it's research, rather than the pure generation of brand new of research, if that helps to clarify. Fantastic, thanks, Emma. Wonderful, happy to hear if there are any more kind of comments and clarifications as well. And as I mentioned, the webinar is recorded and it will be uploaded to the CBC website online as well. We are developing a FAQ section on the website. So there's the first version from previous projects as well, or previous webinars as well. And that will be updated with some of the questions that have been asked and some of the responses here today as well. That's not to say if you hang up this call and you have an epiphany on another question that you wanted to ask, do definitely reach out to us via the email posted on the website. We'll be really happy to answer those over the next couple of weeks, and being mindful of the deadline on the 11th of May as well. Happy to leave it maybe 1 or 2 additional minutes just in case there are any other final questions. But equally, if there are no additional questions, happy to round off and close the webinar a little bit early as well. This is definitely time that we have, for you, reserved for you to answer any questions that you may have. So we're more than happy to be able to respond and to answer. Fantastic. I see several dropping off already. So with that, perhaps I'll be happy to close this webinar. Again, really thank you so much for your time. And we are really looking forward to receiving and reading your applications as they come through. And definitely don't forget the 11th of May will be the final day for your submissions. So we're really looking forward to them, and happy applications.